like an athlete, but got no jumper. Ballin' like an athlete, but got no jumper.
No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today I'm in Salem, Massachusetts with one of my childhood heroes, the singer of probably my favorite hardcore band of all time, Blood for Blood, and also the madman behind the what is it, White Trash Rob's Nodcast podcast, which everybody out there should definitely go subscribe to. Sort of the manic words of a crazy New England born savage, I guess is one way I could put it. Recovering fiend. That's a big part of it. How you living? What's going on?
Nothing much. Doing good. Preparing for This Is Hardcore. I think that's July 27th, and it's the first time I'll be playing a set of a solitary set of just Blood for Blood songs.
Okay.
Ever. Yeah.
So wait, you're going up with a band or just yourself or what?
It'll be Ramallah.
Okay. But you're going to do the Blood for Blood set as part of the Ramallah set?
Ramallah's playing 2 nights.
Okay.
And Blood for Blood will be the first night. That's Thursday. We're headlining, and then we're playing a full. That'll be all Blood for Blood songs. And then the next night there'll just be a full Ramallah set. So it's like 2 sets 1 weekend, and we're gonna have some special guests up for the Blood for Blood set.
I just realized everybody's gonna be able to see my disgusting knee with this big scar on it.
I got you beat. Scars that never fucking go away.
It's a different kind of scar.
I still pick at them too.
Really?
I haven't fucking stuck anything in them in ages. It even worked. If you could see it, it wore away the tattoo.
Right. We're gonna definitely have to get into the heroin at a certain point here. Not
Oh,
doing
for sure.
it, but talking about it. But I want to do this because I don't know if I ever really heard you give like a full in-depth explanation of the very early days of Blood for Blood, like all the way back to the roots. I don't know if it's been a while, if everybody knows the story besides me, but how old were you when you started it?
The band was started by me and the presently disgraced and ostracized singer Buddha.
So I guess we're going to talk about that too. Okay.
Yeah, this, like I told you, there's some areas I can't go with that just because I gave him my word.
Right, for sure.
that
Whatever
it
you're
would-
comfortable with, yeah.
Yeah, but he was my closest friend in high school. We started the band when we were about 15 or 16, but it wasn't Blood for Blood then. We would just get together wherever we could. I was a music nerd, but being from the projects, you can't play music anywhere in the fucking
Right.
projects.
Which is a weird thing about rock bands in general, is they usually end up being the more affluent members of the scene, because how the fuck are you going to start a band when you're in the projects? A lot of money. And
I will tell you what, too, that fucking scorched my ass for years. I got like an immutable core of class envy in me from growing up in the projects. I'm not a Marxist or like a fucking commie or anything like that. I just hate not hate. I can't say hate. I resent people whose lives are nothing but lawn parties and noodle salad. I can't help it. Being from the projects, raised on government cheese and fucking welfare. And rock and roll, of course. What's the old fucking Stone song? What else can a poor boy do? Well, it wasn't the playground of poor people for a long time. I remember when we started playing, I'd have a first Blood for Blood show. I had a PV fucking 75-watt solid state amp. It cost like $100, and they had to put it on a chair. And the other band that was playing their first show had $17,000 worth of gear. We used to call them R2D2 bands because they had those lights strobing and stuff like that.
and what year are we talking?
First Blood for Blood show was in 94.
Okay.
Fucking 94.
Wow, that's crazy.
Isn't that fucking crazy? Is that
That is
almost...
crazy.
How long...
94 was about 30 years ago?
Holy shit.
No.
25?
23, yeah.
23.
Yeah.
23 fucking years. Wasted years.
Wasted? That's how you're feeling?
Yeah.
All
I
right,
wouldn't
but,
change it, though, because if I changed anything along the way, I probably wouldn't be breathing.
but so how did you even know about hardcore? Or what was your exposure to it that made you feel like you could be a part of it?
Me and Buddha were wicked into, like, punk rock and metal. And we used to hang around. I was a Charlestown kid, and that... Charlestown was a little Irish Catholic neighborhood. It was one of the... Boston maintained that little racial enclave thing way later than any other city that I've come across.
Right.
And it was hyper conservative. You had to dress a certain way, you had to talk a certain way, and there were only certain bands you could listen to. So I used to get my ass kicked for wearing like a Slayer shirt or like a Metallica shirt or something.
Things have changed.
Changed.
I don't know if you know that's what every fucking rapper's wearing now, ironically.
I've seen that.
Slayer shirts
And
stuff,
Motorhead.
yeah. And Motorhead and Nirvana and all these
Yeah,
bands.
yeah.
And they're proudly haven't listened to them. They don't give a shit.
That's like I watched this. This is an utter bizarre tangent, but I watched this documentary recently about gay skinheads in Britain.
Wow.
It was on YouTube. I don't remember the name, so
I gotta see that. I didn't even know about that.
it was. But the thing was, when it got down to it, they were just wearing the outfit. They didn't know anything
Right.
about the history, and not only did they not know, they were aggressively like, I don't care about Oi or Dub or the history. I don't
Oh, so
care.
this is relatively recent.
Relatively past like 5 to 10 years. I
Well,
think it was
any
made.
subculture will eventually be like scooped up by fashion-minded people, right?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
It's only a matter of time. I haven't even seen it to a certain extent where I'll see kids wearing like a Youth of Today shirt as like an ironic vintage thing and stuff like that. Where like that's only a matter of time, because if they're wearing Slayer and Megadeth shirts now, there's got to be a Hatebreed vintage 1995 tour shirt or something, right?
Somebody recently told me that the new domain of hipsters, and it's irony based,
Oh yeah.
is black metal.
Oh yeah.
That
big
they're getting,
time.
getting into
they love
black
that.
metal.
And it's super because it's like the most abrasive music, and they sort of like have co-opted it. There's a lot of like black metal bands that dress like they live in fucking Alston.
I've seen some of that.
Is Alston still the place to make fun of, like in terms of like trendy hipsters in
If
Boston?
it isn't, nobody told me.
Because that was definitely it 15 years ago when I was out here.
Our original press kit, our very first press kit, thank God it didn't get out as like canon, but was Why Did You Start a Band? And it was so our friends could have a soundtrack to rough up Alston Scenesters too.
Right.
And that was the entire cause the belly of fucking Blood for Blood.
So by the time I first saw you guys, I think it was 1999, maybe 2000, at when Danny and Davey, their benefit.
Oh wow.
So that was the first time I seen you guys at the Palladium, and at a certain point, I'm up front, close and personally in front of the stage. I'm used to doing this. I've been to Warped Tour and stuff like this. I've been to some local ska and punk shows, and at a certain point, I just get punched as hard as possible as you can imagine in the back of the head, and I turn around, and there's a bunch of giant motherfuckers just moshing like in such a way, and all of them have shirts on with a certain 3 letters on them. And that, I think, was the moment when I realized that hardcore was some serious shit. So,
There's an element of it.
How do you get to you guys forming the band in 1994 to like that show 5-6 years later? Where that seems like an unbelievable amount of progress, if you want to call it that, in terms of you guys as a band. Or
It's kind of funny because Buddha was another inner city kid. He was from Shirley Ave in East Boston. And I was, like I said, from the Charlestown Projects, which they make all those movies about now, the town and fucking Gone Baby Gone, and everybody talks like they're from Revere. I was living 2 lives, and I gotta fucking say that I gotta be grateful to hardcore as much as I sneer at hardcore. The reason I sneer at hardcore, the reason I fucking mock hardcore is because I still, like a knight errant, like some fucking Ignatius Loyola of a dead fucking religion, I still believe in the principles I thought it was founded upon. So when it fails me, I take it as an affront, but it saved my life because I was living this one life in Charlestown with all my friends from the projects, and we were stealing cars and breaking into houses and fucking trying to sell drugs, and we were fucking bad at it, stupid. And I was going nowhere. Most of those friends are dead or in jail, or they're strung out, because Charlestown was the epicenter of a heroin quake, unlike anything I've
even in the mid 90s when you guys came out, that was already the drug of choice.
Oh yeah, amongst the hardcore project people, for sure. As a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you something. I know this will tangent. I'm sorry, but
It's bound to happen. It's okay.
I know that when I see you make a lot of posts about we listen to mumble rap in this house, which I get a fucking kick out of. Would what's that fucking song that gets stuck in my head for weeks? Mama said Little Pump won't be shit.
Shit. Lil Pump is almost like the definitive mumble rapper.
I was gonna say, all right, he strikes me. I may be wrong, but he strikes me like he does a lot of like benzos and drugs.
Yeah, huge Xanax and lean fiend. Yeah.
What I heard from the music, I was like, this is drug rap. The delivery, the enunciation and stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, the music, it's extended into that, and I think that's sincere and honest. That
It's
really,
definitely real.
yeah, for real. I also see a rebirth of rock and roll at its best, punk at its best. These cycles. If you live long enough, you'll see these things. But that Charlestown accent, it at its core, it's not that different from fucking a Boston accent. But the really deep project towny, I like this guy, fucking, what you up to, guy, fucking.
Do you think that accent
Heroin.
is influenced by heroin?
Yes.
It's like consistently. Yeah.
It's gotten so ubiquitous that even when not high, because that's what somebody talks like when they're wicked fucking strung out.
Right.
It's actually just become part of the actual addiction.
I think you could say that about Southern California and weed. There's so much weed being smoked that like the stereotypical Southern California accent is like a stoner.
It's
accent.
a weed accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think where that stuff is pervasive enough, it starts to have a reverse effect.
Yeah,
like
where everybody else catches up, and because
Yeah.
it's I don't know if you would say the same for like Boston heroin epidemic, but with the weed stuff, it's like a lot of those are rappers. They're the cool guys. They're influential. People want to talk like these cool guys.
Surfers back in the
they
day.
might not even realize that that's who they're taking it from. Yeah.
Yep. And a lot of the Charlestown thing, you don't even have to be. That's the accent for some of the really deep project guys. They say,
Yeah.
hey, hi, like this, he's our guy, hey, Ben guy. That originally was just a Boston accent. Then so many people started using dope that became the lingua de franca or whatever the fuck you call it, the colloquial way of talking. And now everybody in Charlestown talks that way. I just find those kind of cultural things fucking fascinating.
Yeah, that's wild.
But I was living the two lives. I was really into music and that type of music, metal, punk, hardcore.
And then also the street shit.
Yeah, well, the thing is, that shit was frowned upon in Charlestown, being so conservative.
Right.
They called that the kill your mother music and stuff like that. But I was so
So
fucking...
hardcore was frowned upon, but being into selling drugs and shit was a little bit more normal.
That was utterly acceptable. That was like that was almost mandatory. I used to say that I talked about it on the Nodcast thing. The cultural values. I had my brother on one day to do a Charlestown episode because he obviously grew up there with me. The cultural values got so perverted in Charlestown. And when I talk shit about Charlestown, it's like family talking about Charlestown, like family talking about family. I'm not mocking it. I'm just assessing it. The hot girls in Seatown don't go out with the football player or the jock or whatever. They go out with the car thief and the guy doing the most drugs. That's like the cultural values there.
Right.
And it's perverse. So I'm living that life because I have to, because that's where I'm from. But I'm into this music on my own. And I'm also, you got to remember, I've adopted all the attitudes of the town too, and a lot of that was some narrow-minded fucking shit. Hardcore saved me from that and gave me
Narrow-minded,
an out
what,
from
like
all that.
racist and shit?
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Back in Charlestown, back at that time, this was only a couple of years after forced busing, when I was a teenager, right around the time of the LA riots. And this wasn't like some white power trip. It's just that every little neighborhood hated every other neighborhood. And they hated anybody that didn't look or act just like them. And they hated anyone they didn't know.
Right. So to hate a black guy is, of course.
Yeah,
I
it
hate
was-
the guy who lives down the street. He looks exactly like me.
Yeah.
I hate that guy.
Yeah, precisely. It
Right.
wasn't part of a larger... There was no eugenics involved, like
Right.
white people are better or anything like that. No, it was Charlestown people are the only people you could trust. Everybody else is an enemy. But God knows, when I was very, very young, 11, 12, 13, because you hang up the corner in a town like that with an age group from 7 years old up to 45. Like, everybody just hangs up the corner, drinks. Hardcore got me away from that, showed me different people, different mindsets, a different world, and it got me out of Charlestown too via the band touring and stuff like that. But originally, Blood for Blood was an expression of just pure anger, hatred, and depression.
Right. Were there other... Were you early on even? Because like Boston's notoriously like one of the most legendary hardcore scenes in the world. Often considered like the best hardcore scene, at least during certain eras.
Sure.
Were you aware that you were creating a band that was going to be part of that lineage? Or did in your mind were you just doing something that sort of was just what you were doing?
No, I never thought it would ever go anywhere. As a matter of fact, when we spoke in terms of like goals or like plans, we just wanted to play the Rat occasionally. That was like as far as we really saw it. Then in the reason to do it was at that time when me, Buddha, and the guys that we were hanging around with at that time started going to shows. It was a real lull for actual hardcore. At the time, the big bands were Sam Blackchurch, Only Living Witness, Tree.
Right, this is
Stomp
like
Box.
early new metal, early Boston new metal. Fucking
Sure.
Tree, man. I used to have a Tree CD.
I used to go to Tree all the fucking time.
But did you consider them hardcore bands, or you consider them sort of like weirdo new metal stuff?
We didn't consider them hardcore bands. I like actually all of those bands. I like the music. I think they were very original. Particularly Only Living Witness. Musically, they're probably my favorite of those four at that time. But they were attracting different types of people, not the pure hardcore scene and stuff like that. We wanted to just bring it back to what we remembered and what we were listening to when we were too young to be in a band, and the stuff that we started with, bands like Slapshot, Agnostic Front, Sheer Terror.
So you're aware of like Slapshot and all these bands that came before you. You're aware of them, and to what extent do you feel like you were kind of emulating them?
At the beginning, we were just straight up biting them.
Right.
All the bands we listened to. I mean, we were only kids at that point, so we're not trying to contribute anything. We just want to sound like what we like, and I think that's what most bands start out doing.
Yeah.
That only becomes a crime if you're doing it when you're 20, 30, and 40.
Right.
Kids, that's all kids do. They start
it.
playing music they love.
Yeah.
But we definitely were aware of these bands because we felt there was a dearth of them in Boston. That was part of what pushed us to keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like why we like, I remember at the time we would practice like 4 or 5 times a week. We didn't get any better. We were a terrible band at the beginning, like truly bad players, bad songwriters. But we'd still practice relentlessly, and it wasn't even fun. It was just this compulsion I never even understood. I never saw it as a vehicle to go anywhere. I never thought we'd tour the world, and I never thought that we'd end up being like one of the classic bands from that style of music. But it's something I tell like up and coming musicians. And more than just musicians, some people that just, celebutantes, they want to be a celebrity, but they don't know why. They just think they should be.
Right. If you're going to be an artist, it's like you should be doing it because you have something to say that you can't hold in.
Yeah, that's it. You
Not
have to
because
do
you
it.
want the end result.
That's it.
You know.
That's it. If you're spending the money now, go to law school. You got to do something
Yeah.
because you love it and it's a compulsion. It's bare minimum. If anything's going to come of it, it'll become because that you're that passionate and obsessive about it. It won't come by planning moves. I mean, there were always some bands that got opportunities because they were wired in with the right people and stuff like that. That'll always be part of it, but nobody remembers
When
them.
did you guys start to get recognized locally, even as like, a force or something that people cared about?
The shows were rough from the beginning. We started to get a kind of a name for that.
What, fighting and stuff? You already had a crew at that point?
No, we were just hanging around the scene. We weren't really. I mean, we were as part of as anybody that went to shows all the time. But the lyrics were obviously very angry at the beginning, and the shows were pretty rough from the get-go. I definitely knew something was going on right before the first U.S. tour. We dropped "Spit My Last Breath," and it was originally on an independent label.
What label at the time?
I think it was called Lost Disciple. It was just some metalhead guy that hung around the scene, and he would occasionally put bands out. And he paid for it and sold a bunch, and we never got paid. But
You guys had a U.S. tour, like, off the strength of that project or off the strength of what you'd already done?
we had a U.S. tour set up just because we used to trade shows with people from... Back then it was like you trade shows.
Right.
We'll get you on a show here, you get us a show in Philly. We got enough of that to set up a tour. And the week before we went on this tour, it was this utter ghetto thing. We were playing people's basements and stuff like that for peanut butter, no money. Spit My Last Breath came out, and we played a show where we made it first available, and we had like 500 copies, and it was just gone in like 5 seconds.
Wow.
That actually funded that tour. That's the only reason we ate on that tour. That was when I was like, something's going on here, something, for better or for worse.
Like that moment when you sort of realize, like, oh, this is scaling. Like, I could actually, like, when I introduce this to more and more people, they actually start to get into it. Like, I could actually, this could transform into something. Is that feeling?
There was a feeling of that. The real tipping point, though, where I was like, all right, I know what we're doing now. Like, I remember there were 3 red letter events. We played a show in New Hampshire. It was our first out-of-state show, and there were like 50 kids up front singing along. And this was only about a year and a half in. We only had a little demo out, a little 5-song demo. And I was like, this is fucking weird. I don't even think I had been to New Hampshire at that point.
Right.
I was playing up in Portland. I was like, that's weird. And that show at the Rat where we sold out of the CDs real quick. But the real tipping point, we grinded for like 5 years. No headway, no seeming headway, no money. Getting some decent tours here and there. Mostly getting passed over for hipper or more dialed into the scene bands, but
less aggressive,
sometimes
less dangerous.
That for sure. But mostly it was politics, just cooler people, people that were more social and stuff like that. But when we finally went out with AF, I was like,
So
all
what
right.
year is that?
I think that was what, 98, 97, 98.
98. All right.
It would be late 97, 98.
So Living in Exile is what, 99?
99, yep.
And so to me, that was the first Blood for Blood release that I went crazy for.
That's
And-
my favorite to this day.
Right. And so at that
most
point,
meaningful favorites.
do you feel like something happened that you figured out what you were supposed to be doing musically at a certain point with that album?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that definitely that's very much you guys coming into your own style and taking a step away from sounding like traditional hardcore in a lot of ways.
For sure. That was like a really liberating time for me personally, because that was also the first album that from top to bottom, every bit of it, I wrote and produced without any input from the band. I just did the entire thing from top to bottom. 90% of Revenge on Society, the album before, was that way as well. But there was still some trickle from the other guys, and there were a few songs from older albums and releases.
You
that
feel
got
like the band
re-released.
worked best when you were in charge primarily
100%.
like that? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't do music any other way, unless I was doing a collaboration with somebody.
Really?
But as far as my own music, I don't... I've gotten to the point now where there's a few people whose judgment I trust, and I will allow input, but at that time, yeah, no, I was like, this is the way it has to be. On the podcast, I've gone into the chronology of why. A lot of it had to do with, at the beginning, I would write all the music, a good portion of the lyrics, and usually the choruses and stuff, and then the other singer would fill in. And it got to the point where it was no longer expressing my perspective.
Right.
And I didn't like the idea of answering for anybody else's lyrics, so I was like, I'm just going to co-opt this. I'm going to just take it. I know what I can do now. I got
And they were agreeable on that?
No, it took a lot of like finagling, and one of the ways I did it is I just would write the stuff at home and bring it in finished, and it would be inarguable at that point. And by the end, with like, it got even to the point where by Outlaw Anthems, they wouldn't even hear the stuff until we were in the studio. I would just show the drummer the stuff. We'd go in and track the drums, and then I'd show the guys literally line by line what they had to play.
Yeah.
It was just a safest, securest way for me to keep what I wanted to do intact. But
By the time Living in Exile comes out, though, you're on Victory, right?
yes,
Okay.
Revenge of Society was
Oh, that was
the
on
first
there
one.
too.
Victory, yeah.
Okay, so how did that end up happening? Like, how big were you guys at that point that you were able to get, they were the biggest label in hardcore at that time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
By far.
As far as I know, they're also still the biggest privately owned record label on earth, as
Really?
far as I know.
Wow, that's interesting.
They still manage to have no corporate interest. Their distribution is Sony, but that's still all privately owned by Tony. That dude built an empire for himself.
Yeah.
And they were instrumental in Blood for Blood. Like a lot of people like to knock Victory, but Victory's the only label that I get a check from every quarter. I don't have to chase them down. And they gave us a great opportunity, but we were just getting a name around Boston, and we would prove that we could tour, which back then was what most labels wanted.
To prove that you were actually capable of being on the road?
Being on the road, they wanted that more than a buzz or something like that. They wanted to prove that you'd stay out there, because that's by attrition how you sell records in that scene. You got to stay out there, because the resources like MTV and radio aren't available, so you got to grind. But we went and played a single show in Chicago, and at that point it was the furthest we'd gone out west. It was with Cold as Life, and a riot jumped off during our set. Ended up like 12 cop cars riot up and down the street, and we thought that we didn't play Chicago again for a long time because there was some lingering beef over this. We didn't start anything, something just erupted during our set. And
But it was your beef? It wasn't like fans fighting security or that kind of thing? It was like your people?
Partially. There was some drunk... It's an old story, but some drunk metalhead came to the show, and he was pie-eyed drunk, and he was yelling a bunch of shit into the mic, and I guess some of it was like Nazi-ish and shit like that. So one of the Chicago guys put a King Cobra 40 ounce off his head, and it was full, and it skidded off and hit me in the face and knocked me out. So a couple of guys that we went with and the rest of the band kind of rushed into the pit to see what happened, because they thought the metalhead threw it, and it just exploded from there. Like the beef got squashed because everybody realized nobody intended any of this to happen, but people came from other bars and they didn't have word of what was happening, and then fights just started.
Right.
And it just expanded from there. Typical hardcore snowball of events.
Was there so it's often like the narrative that at a certain point, Boston was sort of infested with Nazis and shit in the hardcore scene, and then at a certain point that kind of got taken out. Was that always an element early on when you go into shows and stuff? And was it like what you're describing in terms of just being sort of dumbass kids from the projects who just sort of hate everybody else, or was it like a real white power thing?
No, when I first started going to shows, there were a couple of Boogeymen crews. I was like 13. It was Jajay and Scooby-Doo Posse. As crazy as the names sound.
Wow. Those are the hardcore crews.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Oh, yeah. They were like the scary ones at the time. And they had already ridden out the Nazis by that point. Organized white power as associated with the scene itself. I guess back in the 80s, there was a lot of it.
Right.
And there were like a period of warring states. And from then on, it never got a foothold in Boston or New York either. Mm-hmm. But it's always been pervasive. I've heard out on the West Coast, and I've seen some evidence.
You go to Huntington Beach, you can definitely walk around there. You find some guys with some big ass swastikas on the back of their heads and shit like that. Yeah,
I think part of that too is it's related. It's got to be related to the prison culture.
Yeah, and a lot of like L.A. street culture and even like the Bloods and Crips is sort of like dictated by like guys who are in jail and stuff. I think so. It kind of makes sense that. Yeah, and you always hear about that on the West Coast too. Is that like that white culture in prison is white power out there? That's like full on. You kind of expected to fall in line with that.
Everything I've seen in guys from the West Coast I've talked to, it's very regimented out there. Whereas like in the Northeast, prison is racially polarized, but it's not as regimented. It's not as militant. I mean, you can talk to a dude from another town or another race. Most people click up by their town,
right,
more than they do like the race. I guess that stuff is still prevalent,
which is weird because it's based on your area and your block and everything on the West Coast until you get to jail, and all of a sudden you're in jail and you could be a Crip, you could be a Blood, you're getting along.
These Uber groups,
but then these other groups take over once you get into jail. This is just people telling me.
Yeah,
shit, yeah.
I've been fortunate to not have any incarceration experiences out on the West Coast.
It's almost kind of shock. Wait, but how much time have you done out here?
I've never been to prison, just jail. Okay. A couple of major arrests in my 20s. I was in Hamburg jail for a couple of nights. That's a story. I think I told that on the podcast, but
let's hear it. Is it a good one?
There's some humorous elements to it.
What year does it take before you're playing in Hamburg?
We had already been there a bunch of times,
okay.
But this story took place about 2004 because I didn't really get fucked up on drugs until I was about 26. Until then, I was just an alcoholic. And the funny thing is, I was never a libertine. I was never like, hey, man, give me whatever drugs you got. I was such an alcoholic by the time I was 13 that I knew to stay away from other drugs.
Really?
I knew they'd wreck my fucking life. And being from the projects, I saw all the scarecrows strung out on dope and the cokeheads just fucking each other over at the drop of a hat that I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. I already got enough of a problem with the bottle.
What year is it by the time you get into heroin?
I think I started fucking around with pills when I was about 24, and that was, like I said, I was avoiding drugs. I ended up working back in Charlestown. I picked up a job there, and I was hanging around with the old guys, and I tried quitting drinking, which I could do for a month or two at a time. I was a degenerate alcoholic back then. And
but since you were like 12, 13?
I started drinking when I was about 11, yeah.
Wow. And like hard from the very beginning?
Yes, right from the get-go. I knew I had a problem by the time I was 12 or 13.
And this didn't have like a huge negative effect on the band? The band was able to somehow develop despite this?
Yeah, we were all drinkers, and that's obviously kind of a big part of the punk rock oi.
Yeah.
Because that's where we started going to those shows, and there's a big drinking contingent in hardcore. There's also straight edge, but I was trying to quit drinking, and I used to be able to do that until I couldn't. Like the day I woke up and I wanted to get drunk. So I woke up one day and I went to a bunch of Charleston guys and said, get me a bunch of Xanax, because I used to be prescribed that. I just want to go home tonight, chill out, and sleep. And they came back and said, there's no Xanax. This is the same thing. They gave me a bunch of Vicodin.
Right.
Not even close to the same thing.
But you had been messing around with Xanax just to sleep and shit before that?
Yeah, I was prescribed it for like anxiety and shit, and I never had a propensity to abuse it. You're
a trendsetter.
It would just rot in my house. I'd have like a bottle I'd forget about, and I'd find it, and oh yeah, I got these. All right, I could sleep tonight. But because I used to have mad insomnia from the bipolar, but the kid came and gave me like 2 Vicodins. Next day I went and was like, get me 60 of those. So I gave him like $400. I was like, get me like 60 or 70 of those, and I was off and running with that shit.
So as soon as it hit, you just knew that was your shit?
3 most important experiences of my life where everything made sense were the first time I whacked off. Up until that point, everything was gray and confused and angst-ridden. First time I whacked off in my bed when I was 11,
And then
blew
all of a
a
sudden you
load.
realize, like, oh, this is the release.
I
Yeah.
was like, this is why I'm here.
This is how I
I'm
make
here to
myself
use
feel
this thing.
normal.
Yes, this I'm here to put this thing in as many human beings as I humanly possibly fucking can. And I'm gonna-
regardless of race, gender,
Yep.
whatever.
I'll tell you that this is a story I've never
I
told.
just got you to admit that you're gay.
Yep.
Okay.
Under the right circumstances.
Really?
Fuck that. No, no.
Oh, I
no.
didn't even know that.
I-
Okay.
I probably could be convinced. No, this is the thing.
There's enough heroin on Earth for you to go get.
My problem.
This is taking an interesting turn.
Let me think about this. I mean, maybe for like, I could probably hold my nose and do something I didn't like for like maybe like 3 kilos or something like that if
Wow,
it was
okay.
pure.
Oh.
But no, the thing is, like anybody that knows me, if I was gay, I would be flamingly gay because I don't keep my
Right.
mouth shut about nothing. Dudes' bodies are just fucking gross. Women are just so lickable.
It's pretty easy to understand why you wouldn't want to suck a dick.
Yeah, I mean, just
Smells
dudes,
weird.
they're like a Jeep. It's like wanting to have sex with a Jeep.
Got
Women
mud
are
on
all,
it.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, women got curves and they don't got hair everywhere, and
Right.
some of them do. Some of them
Yeah.
do. In Europe, they do.
It's actually really, I hate that people act like it's so shocking that like that heterosexual people find the concept of being gay is weird or awkward for us to think about. It's like, of course we think it's weird. It's like the one thing on Earth that we know other guys on Earth are doing, but we can't imagine it.
Oh, for sure.
They got the gene, they got the switch flipped.
To them,
They're doing it.
like, I have to assume that my unidirection finder for the vag is as singular and uncompromising as their finder for the dick.
Right.
And they got to, like, from the dick, even from when I was a kid, I always wanted to look at the girls, like, in the bathroom, like, you know, I got in trouble for that in fucking 2nd grade, following them into the bathroom.
I heard my mom having a conversation with her friend on the phone when I was probably like 8, being like, nah, he's not gay. I seen him with the girls at school, blah, blah, blah. And that was weird for me because it was before I really knew what gay was. But I always knew that my mom didn't think I was, even when I figured it out. I'm like,
Oh, that's cool.
I found out, and then I'm like, oh, that's what my mom doesn't think I do. That's cool. That's nice of her.
That's cool. That's cool. My old man used to call us pansies and faggots, but he didn't mean it like that. It was
Right.
just, he was just being mean.
Yeah, that was yeah. I don't know if my dad would have said faggot so much, but like my parents definitely. It was weird that they were liberals, super open-minded, but to call us gay or joke around like that was super normal. Now that's completely off limits.
Yeah, it's like verboten, but you know, I hear both sides of it. This is like another total tangent, but back when we were kids, when you called somebody, that's fucking gay, it wasn't a comment on somebody's sexuality. It was
not
tantamount to
close.
silly and
Yeah,
stupid. However, I'm willing to give up the usage of that term because you don't get to decide what offends somebody else. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Times change.
times change. I mean, it's the thing is, you know, right now there's a whole subculture of the right wing that their entire cause day belly is that I can't say faggot anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, get the fuck over it. It's not
Yeah.
that big a deal. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, give me a fucking break. But
But I think the issue for them becomes that once that starts being extrapolated to include like every other potentially
Sure.
offensive thing that you could ever say, and that the label like is like, oh, you're a Nazi. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
for sure,
You don't
for
have
sure.
to do much to be called a Nazi these days, and then once you're labeled a Nazi, they treat you like you really are a Nazi.
yeah, I do think certain extreme terms get thrown around way too much, and I'll make a deal with the right wing. We'll stop calling center-right conservatives Nazis when they stop pretending that socialism is tantamount to communism, because they're not even close to the same thing. It's like the equivalent to calling somebody that's just marginally right-wing on a couple of issues, you're a fucking Nazi. That's not the case. Most of America is actually center-right politically. We'll drop that if they can, if the conservative pundits can stop calling socialism
Communism.
tantamount to communism, because they're not the same thing.
Well, would you say that you always like it's been clear to you that you were a leftist or a liberal?
No, not at all. Like I said, when I was young, liberal in Charlestown, as a kid, we used to call each other liberal if you wanted to fight somebody. Ah, you fucking liberal.
Yeah.
And it was fighting words.
Mhm.
Although there was no, in hindsight, there was no political thrust behind
You
it.
didn't really know what it meant necessarily so much as it was meant the same thing as like you're gay.
Yes, kind of. It was because the yuppies that were gentrifying Charlestown, they tended to be liberal. So anything associated with them was bad.
Even in the mid-late 90s, that was the issue already.
Oh yeah, my family got burned out of our house.
Really?
because
Burned
we-
out?
Burned out, firebombed 2 years in a row.
the house next door than us. They were connected.
Firebombed, you think, because like by somebody who wanted to build up that land
Yes.
or something?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. My grandmother wouldn't sell, and I was awake. I heard the screech of the tires and the Molotov go through the window, and a year later we were in the not a year later, a couple of weeks later we were in the projects. It took up. We had to stay with family for a while until we got an opening in the projects because there's like a waiting list for the projects. But my grandmother had that. It was like the one thing our family had. She had that house in the family for ages, and this was during the time of the gentrification of Charlestown when the yuppies were buying up every bit of property. My grandmother wouldn't sell, so.
So did that
Hardball.
was that shocking to you at the time? Or was
Um,
that almost something that you'd been become numb to that sort of thing?
I had a hatred about that didn't relent for years. I would have given anything to find who did it. I would have given anything to find who did it. And I would have lit their house on fire, both sides, and stood out there and cooked weenies until the cops came and collected me. I would have done time for that with a smile on my fucking face.
So you always had a pretty strong disposition towards like eye for eye style vengeance, huh?
I guess it's funny because I detest violence. Like I really do. I hate it, but it doesn't change the fact that those are the waters I swam in my whole life. Like I hate drugs too. I hate what it does to people in society and shit like that. But that and a nickel, yeah, exactly. I mean, what my ethical evaluation of the way things are is smoke. But to complete the thought. 3 red letter days were the first day I whacked off. Second was the first time I drank a beer. Third was the first time I did a Viking.
Really?
Yeah, that's how everything was sketched in beautiful light. I went home with the Viking and I popped it. And I sat on the fucking couch with my roommate and watched wrestling, and it was a religious experience. And I don't care about wrestling. Never did. I was like, this is awesome.
But what, it took away all the anxiety and all the pain that you were feeling? and
Everything. Every bit of angst, that jet roar of fucking blackness in my fucking head that was unrelenting from the day I can remember until first whack off, first beer, first Viking.
But you put all 3 of those before getting some pussy for the first time.
Yeah, that wasn't as important to me. First time I got laid, I actually was drinking downstairs, the girl's house. And
You like drinking so much that the pussy didn't even matter?
she kept yelling for me to come upstairs to fuck her. This is my first time, and I was so enjoying the drinking. She was like laying rose petals on the stairs and lighting candles, and I was like, I'll be up in a minute. Listening to
Rose petals?
Something like that. She was trying to make like a big deal out of
That's romantic.
it. Yeah. I'm downstairs sucking down her parents' liquor. Going, I'll be up in a minute.
Wow, that's fire. So okay, like we're talking about late '90s. You know, was there ever a point where Blood for Blood to you started to seem like, oh, I could quit my job, I can make a living off of this. Oh, like, this could somehow be some kind of career. At a certain point, you must have started to look at certain metal bands and people that had made actual careers for themselves. People who had taken that leap of like, oh, I'm gonna go on a major label and start to make some songs that are gonna be able to be on MTV. Did any of that start to occur to you?
The MTV stuff was, like, obviously the door was closed. But,
But you could have told a lot of hardcore bands that still gave it a shot.
that's
right?
true, that's true, that's true. And that's unpredictable, too. For a long time, it's unpredictable what'll end up on the radio. You
Never
really
really
can't
worked
tell.
for anybody, right? Like you never. I mean, you look at the biggest hardcore bands that got, like we talk about Anthrax or Biohazard, but they never took off to a level that the labels are happy with, right?
Yeah, no,
Maybe
not
same thing.
yeah, not for mainstream.
Hardcore itself never really had much of a chance to become mainstream, right? Like it was like the new metal version of it became mainstream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Axe took components of it, like that. Down, 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 down.
Yeah.
Well, I heard that riff for 10 years before it ended up on. That was like at every show, 4 bands would play that riff, but that's not dissing Korn. They took it and applied real heavy duty songwriting to it, and sonics, and gave it a flavor that captured a mass
Can you only
market.
say that now in retrospect, having seen the way the world works for 20 more years? You like look at Korn has an element of respect for him because
Sure.
You name dropped Limp Bizkit, right? At a certain point on a record. Did you name drop him, or was it just like
Yeah.
an allusion? To
One of our best-selling shirts was "Fuck Fred Durst."
Really?
Yeah, that was we sold a lot of them at
Was
the
still
height of
float
that.
around on eBay?
Yeah, I think so. Somebody was like, "You should do those again." I'm like, "Come on!" I'm like, "That's like
Fred Durst was a-
kicking. Yeah, it's like kicking a dog when he's
You know,
down."
he signed to Lil Wayne at a certain point. Limp Bizkit did.
What's that?
He signed to Cash Money Records at a certain point, and there's a video on YouTube of like a new featuring Lil Wayne's song from Limp Bizkit. And the thing that stood out to me most about it was that at a certain point in the video, he's got a big beard with grays in it, and then at a certain point in the video, he's got a big beard and it's black. Like he dyed his beard in the middle, like in between shoots or shots, you know.
The
Like,
continuity editor wasn't paying attention.
I mean, it was probably filmed over the course of, like, you know, I'm assuming, like the scene where they had to go get Lil Wayne. It's probably pretty tough to get Lil Wayne to film a music video, but I mean that was only probably 3-4 years ago.
That recent?
I swear to God, I mean, if you watch it right now, you will die laughing.
I'll fucking have to check that out. I haven't heard nothing about them in ages.
Yeah, right. I mean, I get the idea they didn't do so well. They're still around. You know, he's even associated with a few of the rappers that I know underground.
Well, I mean, during their heyday, those 3 albums sold like 10 million copies apiece.
Yeah,
That is just
insane.
that is like atypical record sales. You've copied the place for better or for worse. 3 albums like that, you copied the place in music history one way or the other. I mean, there's only so many bands that sell like that.
Yeah, but he came out at a Bones, Xavier Wolf, Chris Travis, Such All the Waterboys show in LA a couple years ago, and he came out and performed fucking, what was it? Did it all for the Nookie, I think was it, or Break Stuff, I guess was the other song, right?
Yep, those are the 2.
And I think he did Break Stuff, and it was fucking crazy to me because, you know, I'm probably 30 at the time, standing there watching it, and the average fan out there is 15 to 18, and I'm thinking to myself, like, because nobody gives a fuck when he's performing it. I'm thinking this song's so big, how the fuck do they not know it? And I'm thinking, you know, I was 13 when the song came out.
Yeah.
They were not born when the song came out, so I can't blame them.
That's like that is crazy to me. Like one of the strange things is some of the more recent shows, seeing young people there, like a good portion of the audience, and girls.
Right.
Like that was when we toured the last European tour Ramallah did. One of the guys, the promoters actually came up and said, "You know something funny about the audience tonight?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "They were girls." And I was like, "So?" And they're like, "They were only there for your set." And I was in one other band. He named one of the other bands. Evergreen Terrace was the other band. I'm like, "Okay, that's weird." And he was like, "Yeah, a lot of your lyrics are about abuse and stuff like that." And sometimes he was trying to tell me that there's something sensitive underneath all the. I was like, cool. I don't know what to say.
I mean, it definitely makes perfect sense to me that, like, Ball for Ball was able to appeal to it. Because that's the only reason I ask about, like, I know the concept of you guys going mainstream might have seemed totally absurd. But don't you think that you guys probably more than any other band in hardcore at a certain point were sort of like, oh, we're making these almost like hardcore bar rock anthems, that this is the kind of thing that maybe could scale up to being a bigger audience?
I think if we had stayed the course, and I hadn't got whacked out on drugs, and some other things hadn't happened within the band, stuff that it's not my place to talk about, just people going in different directions. I think there was potential there for sure, especially because I remember after doing the Dropkicks tour. That was a big tour for us.
What year was that?
That was 2000, I think.
And so they're already...
Then we did another one in about 2003.
They're pretty gigantic by 2000.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah.
And they fucked with you guys? Like, they were always down with, like, real punk and hardcore and stuff?
Ken Casey, man. Yeah.
I don't know enough about them. I really should.
Directing brain behind the Dropkicks is Ken Casey. He's their songwriter and their business guy. The whole band contributes to the music, but he's the force behind that band. He was always legit. He would just, if there were bands from Boston that were making noise legitimately, he would take them out. He actually, it's a side anecdote, he had to almost fire his booking agent because the booking agent of that first Dropkicks tour hated Blood for Blood. She fucking hated us. I won't mention her name, but hated us. Was like, no, you're not taking him out. He had to threaten to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's how serious it was to him. And they ended up making a compromise. He ended up taking out a band that he didn't want to take out for years, that he had been trying to get. But
that actually is, that gets a lot of respect from me because, you know, once you're in the music industry, it's like the bands that you take out of support, all of a sudden becomes, you know, you can make money by taking a band out or not pay them, save money. So to make a decision like to bring a fucking band that's not a huge draw,
sure.
you know,
especially for their audience.
Exactly. That's actually like a big show that you're actually, you know, care about the culture per se.
Oh yeah, Ken was always the man with that. I could never have anything but gratitude towards that guy because that helped. Mm-hmm. But he did tell us after that tour, he said, "You guys went over great," because it really was a great tour. Strangely, the gangsta core thing from the '90s, we didn't cross that well with. We just didn't. We got better reactions from more the street rock oriented bands.
You like positioned yourself directly in opposition to that. So it must have felt kind of rewarding going into like the late 90s, early 2000s when the new metal thing was sort of like exposed as just like it was a bad idea. You seemed to
Yeah.
sort of accept that pretty early on, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we were like the
If not a bad idea, it wasn't going to last
Yes.
that long.
and it could have too. It could have. And I
We
still
still
feel
like Adolf Hitler of fucking anti like new metal.
Yeah, we were, and the thing was, it had really nothing to do with the music, and it definitely had nothing to do with the hip hop element. Like I said, like we talked about that before. When I write lyrics, that's all I fucking listen to. I am not listening to some death metal Cookie Monster singer doing a 1/1 time scheme to write my lyrics. Blah blah blah. No fucking way. My war was not against anything musical or even fashion oriented. It was that time period when everybody was pretending to be some kind of killer or gangster. Like, nobody was being themselves around that time. Everyone was pretending to be dangerous. And, it was just a Hollywood script. It just trickled down, that's all. And the thing was, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
No, because that was like the mainstream interpretation. But yeah, I always felt hardcore should be immune to it, so we sort of aligned against that. Just be yourself. And there were tons of other kids out there that were just as tired. Whenever you're honest, music is often just a reaction to what you hate from before.
The hardcore scene specifically, though, was like it was like the antidote to new metal, at least the way it perceived itself during that time period when you said late 90s.
Yeah, I think so.
And maybe even the strongest time for hardcore, like in terms of like size and like, was that a time where you could say that might have been one of the high points in terms of the scene? And
Yeah, size-wise, yeah. It was viable.
You're always good when you have a good, well-formed enemy to face off with, and that, I think, kind of is what hardcore found in, like, Limp Bizkit, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it just became too easy. I mean, that'd be such a caricature. But at the beginning, if you're the first person to say something, even if it's obvious, it can be lucrative. But fuck, that brings me back just thinking about that whole time period.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm still breathing.
Was there a certain point where you sort of realized, like, hey, maybe Blood for Blood's not going to last forever? Like, when did it start to... Because by what point would you say you were, like, functionally broken up, as in you were no longer a full-time touring, existing /band?
Oh, man, we broke up so often, so many fucking times. I never thought it would last. I had no retirement plans with that being. That's why I started doing other bands.
Right.
Like Sinners and Saints in 2000 and 2001, and then I started Ramallah a couple years later.
Oh, okay, so Sinners and Saints, right, that was before Ramallah.
Yeah, that was actually before. That we didn't do much with that. We only played regionally and put out one album, but those were attempts to not have to rely on Blood for Blood, and at the same time not compromise Blood for Blood by putting out a fake Blood for Blood, just soaking up the name. I never wanted to hide under the umbrella of one name.
But did you always have aspirations to make music going beyond hardcore? Because Sinners and Saints was more, what, sort of...
Like pop rock.
Punk rock,
Yeah, I mean, not pop, but...
Not pop punk, but more in that direction?
It was kind of Turbo Negro-ish,
Yeah.
which was happening at that time, like that sort of rock and roll revival. It was like a... just not in the spirit of that, I guess. I just do whatever music I feel like, really, and the songs themselves just get assigned to whatever band they fit with. But I'll write it, I'll do anything I feel like. I don't feel like constricted to, oh, we got to sound like that album at that time. That's death.
Right.
That's like creative death.
Did you start to feel sort of like turned off to hardcore and like? I feel like there's something that happens where hardcore is so traditional and so anything that strays too much from it is just not considered to be hardcore anymore. That a lot of bands sort of they after being around for 3-4 years or whatever, they start to feel like they need to do something different, and then that's not accepted by the scene. And a lot of times that's the exit point for a lot of bands.
Oh, for sure. That's been a man. I mean, almost every even established stalwart fucking hardcore bands. Almost all of them had a period where they were shunned for some album they did. They stepped out of line or whatever. They should. A lot of the heavy stuff, the heavy stuff these days is, to me, these days, one of the reasons it's not as vital is it's all genre refinement. It's all like narrowing down and even tighter version of some genre that's already pretty tight to begin with.
Right.
It happened with black metal. Black metal was super interesting musically for a while.
But then how do you continue like how could a death metal band make a death metal album that would bring in people that weren't already into death metal?
You
know?
the reason I survived
I'm open
that.
to that. I would like to know the answer to that because I think it'd be cool to have black metal and death metal be like, or even hardcore, like really be on center stage again. And I think that's kind of what's happening to rock in general.
Oh, for sure. Fuck, man. I mean, if you want to talk about that, what was the last really cultural phenomenon of rock and roll?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time, but
what it was like the 2009, 2010 like indie wave of like, you know, MGMT and all these sort of fucking really poppy indie bands that I think that was kind of the swan song for guitar-based rock up till now that I know of.
that would be the last names that I've even recognized, really. Now it's like the only thing you've seen is like Munson Brothers and stuff like that, but that's like almost Mumford & Sons.
I hate that fucking shit.
Do you?
No, I mean, there's an element that I like about it because it's sort of got a little bit of like the Rocky Murphy's Blood for Blood, like sort of sing-song, everybody's getting along and stuff, but it's been transformed into this, God.
When you look out at the audience, you go, I'm shunning this.
There's just way too much American Eagle in the audience for you to fucking get into this. Way too many guys wearing flip-flops and jeans.
Looking like Chuck Liddell. The big thing with extreme music is if you are only defining it by the extremity itself, there's always some band, like if you're the tightest, hottest, meanest, fastest, last band right now, there are 200 bands coming up to cut your fucking head off. You can't stay relevant.
Right.
You have to connect with them lyrically. You have to be communicating to them something that matters to their fucking lives. The extremity of the music itself, that truly is a fad. Now, there's some bands that keep reinventing themselves. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Maybe Metallica,
Right.
something like that.
Well, they definitely like grown into their old age, even though people like us probably aren't listening to their new stuff. I mean, it's still really popular, and they still seem like they're happy with what they're making, you know?
For sure. And, you know, their albums don't sound exactly the same from one to the next, but the way we survived, I never wanted to be in the fastest or the heaviest or the tightest band, and thank God, because we would have failed across the board. I wanted to be in the realest band, like a band that most adequately represented the way I lived and the way everybody around me was living. Like, that was it. And I think that's, you can remain viable that way.
Right.
And my suggestion to kids come out playing this music, communicate that shit if you got it in you. No matter what it is. Don't be something you ain't. Speak from your experiences. What are your rages? What are your fears? What are your fucking experiences? Speak to them because you're probably not alone. I've lived a really extreme life. Like from the projects to the cruise shit to the fucking music shit to the dope shit to running around the world and all that stuff. That's not a common narrative, but the individual experiences I'm describing, they resonate with so many fucking people because it's sincere. Like, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm a fucking noble at this place. I'm a fucking at the end of the day. But to do that, if kids are coming up, you want to keep it viable, be fucking honest and say what you got to say.
Do you like to talk about the cruise shit, or is that kind of off limits in terms of the memories of how it all sort of formed and everything?
I like to. I'll speak about it like sociologically. I don't mind. I don't like to get into too specifics because I never use like names and like, even if I tell like a funny horror story. I actually research like the statute of limitations and I'm gonna get busted for this, but
that is like from a sociological perspective, like you basically were there from the beginning of this. Like, what was the impetus that, like, did you just realize at a certain point, like, I need a fucking crew, and if we're going to be in this hardcore thing in particular, we're going to need...
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I never identified that element of it. It's just that the closest friends of my life, and the people that were with me, because the guys that I grew up with in Charlestown, I didn't stay in touch with a lot of them. Not, like I said, a lot of them aren't around anymore, but we had the common experiences of our hometown, of course, but they were only close to me because we were geographically slammed together.
Right.
Once I started getting out the hardcore punk and stuff like that, I started meeting people with similar perspectives, similar values, similar experiences, beyond just the narrow definition we grew up on the same street. Those turned out to be the closest people in my life. So it was like a natural progression. These are just my people. These are just the people that I'm close to. But as far as like, I was not there at the beginning. But the original guys that founded it, they were just street kids. They were just, like a lot of them homeless street kids, and found each other through hardcore and punk, angry music that attracts people from disrupted lives and stuff like that. But the violence comes from the fact that there is nothing more vulnerable and exploitable than a homeless fucking teen. Even a child on the street will get snatched up by social services and protected to some extent.
Right.
Homeless teens, they're defenseless. Like they can slip through the cracks, and
you're in that limbo where people don't know if they should consider you a child or an adult. So they feel like you kind of should be able to take responsibility for yourself. But if you're 13 or 14 or 15, you don't really have the resources to be able to start to do that.
Often you can barely get a job. How do you rent an apartment?
Not to mention where you're at mentally. It's like you just probably don't have enough real world resources or anything to be able to do that shit.
And a lot of them are psychotically angry because if they're homeless, they're fleeing something traumatic, something destructive, something maladaptive. And where I think the violence came from is it's like a Sun Tzu thing. You realize you're vulnerable. You're easily exploited. You're easily victimized. If you learn to quickly, if somebody confronts you and you smash their head in immediately with a cue ball and a sock, that is the Sun Tzu, kill one to terrorize 1,000. That raises a flag and says, leave me the fuck alone. And then those guys will be left alone in their little commune house that they're living in, wherever they're, which will probably be a bad area because they're going to find somewhere cheap to pool their resources and stuff like that.
Do you see the whole crew thing as kind of being the ultimate expression of that? Of like, we're going to put forth an outward image of violence or outward expression of it so that everybody knows not to fuck with us.
Yeah, I mean, that's at its purest. And if there is any sort of definable motivation behind it, that is what it often is reduced to. Because I'll say this, and this is no mystery to... You know, some of the meanest motherfuckers, a lot of that aggression and violence comes from the fact that when they were defenseless, they were traumatized and abused. And later, when they're not defenseless, they're going to be way less inclined to allow somebody to lay hands on them or whatever. It's, what's that old adage? The fact that an abused child doesn't turn into a monster is less amazing than the fact that all of them should. Like, I just butchered that. I just fucked that up.
It's surprising.
More of them should be monsters.
That kids who are abused don't all become horrific abusers themselves.
Precisely. And that's one of the other things that, like, a lot of the guys that I grew up with that have kids, it is front and center, like, in their lives that we're breaking the cycle. I am providing a better life for my kids. I actually admire that. It's also why when somebody puts up pictures of their 2-year-old in a Blood for Blood shirt with a little clip of them listening to Blood for Blood, I'm like, don't do that.
That's weird for you?
A little bit.
People send me videos of their 5-year-old watching my videos with him, and I'm like, this kid is going to know about Xanax. He's going to know about backwoods. Like, this is not good.
That DYS would look into that.
Yeah,
Nobody should be watching any of our stuff if they are under, like, 25 and had a horrible life.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to balance, the difference between being real with yourself and being real with yourself and living an open and honest life publicly, but then accepting me being open and honest about my life experience is being a terrible role model to all these kids.
You're just being true to you.
I'm sure that you've dealt with this too, though. You know, because at a certain point, do you ever have to reckon with that and feel like, fuck, with Blood for Blood, maybe I'm promoting. I'm not just describing my life. I'm promoting violence and alcoholism or whatever.
I've tried to be so fucking cautious about that. That is like one of my few guiding principles: is do not celebrate any of this stuff. Do not glorify. That's my war with the entire music industry, mainstream music. Is that it's all this stuff that should be mourned is celebrated and glamorized, and often by people that have fucking nothing to do with it. Like, literally have no experiences with it.
Who you talking about was the fake heroin addict dude that you hate?
Nikki Sixx.
Yeah, so you don't believe his addiction?
Not a word of it.
I always found this very intriguing that you you take issue with him false claiming his addiction.
And he sells it that whole, I'm the Prince of Darkness and evil deeds, man. You're a fucking poser. I've heard it from the industry, just secondhand. And if you, as crazy as it sounds, if you read Slash's book, Slash was a dyed-in-the-wool heroin addict for sure. Nikki Sixx would only look for dope when he had an entourage of people and cameras. Then he'd suddenly meet dope and stuff like that. And he sold his book, The Heroin Diaries, like he's some modern William S. Burroughs or fucking Hunter S. Thompson or some shit. Fuck you. And the thing is, like, I don't care if you're a real addict and you gotta, that's the ground zero of your life's demons, and you gotta produce art about that. By all means, Godspeed, do your fucking thing. But if you ain't, I mean, very few people are gonna pretend to be a junkie. It's a social stigma. But with him, it's that whole rock and roll excess.
Well, there's a whole pose associated with it. And we've seen it with Kurt Cobain. We've seen it with fucking a lot of these rap kids now who like are drinking lean and taking Xans.
Ooh, they're playing with fire.
Yeah, this whole pose of like, you know, my eyes are rolling back into my head. I wish I was dead. I'm killing myself day by day. It's like, you know, you actually live that. But it's crazy to think that there are people who are, you know, using that to their
selling it. Selling it as product.
But do you think Nikki Sixx was like a sort of a branding genius there, that like by seizing onto it, or do you think that he was just fully just a fucking poser who didn't realize the benefit of what he was doing?
Well, I mean, if your goal is to make money, he was a genius. But as far as like art having any sense of ethics, that dude should be pilloried in public. Like he should be sent to Singapore and fucking caned in the face, because that was when rock and roll, like every kid, you know, listened to it. That was the cool music and shit. And he sold that as part of the package, like the whole rock and Motley Crue experience. You know, they were wild, man. I'm not going to argue that. They probably needed a squeegee to wipe the pussy juice off their shoes. They were maniacs wrecking cars and stuff like that. I don't buy the heroin thing with him, and I think that's a nasty thing to sell people as cool and vicarious. Like I said, with everything from my personal experience, as ugly as they are, I try to never celebrate it. There's a tone of like mourning it rather than celebrating or glorifying it. And you know, so much of mass media and mainstream entertainment is glorification of stuff that the people producing it have very, very little to do with. And you know, that's
music industry is the exact same thing.
Oh, the music industry is
grown ass men just like promoting teenage drug addicts. I'm no better. But.
Yeah, there's a lot of it, and I know like a lot of these young rappers are actually dabbling with these chemicals. They're gonna start dropping like flies, because it's not the like I am a fucking mathematical anomaly. I should not be alive. I should be dead 1,000 times over. I should be in prison 1,000 times over. The success story, you know, that the other reason why I get on when I do the podcast and talk about it when I'm fiending is because I'm tired of that VH1 narrative of I went through the fire and now I'm stronger. Well, no, that's true. That's true. I got through the fire, but there's still days I want to stick a needle in my arm. You know what I mean? Like that's never going to go away.
But you don't relapse? You don't, like, what's the status of your addiction at this point in your life?
How long? I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 10 years.
Really? So that's not particularly tempting for you at this point?
No. I hate to say it, but William S. Burroughs was right in Naked Lunch when he said that heroin addiction cures you of all other addictions.
Okay.
That becomes your...
So it really, as somebody who hasn't done it, it really is that. It's like way beyond what you've experienced with anything else.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like a God force, and when it's calling it a demon in the literal sense is somewhat apt, because, look, the camera's there. Like your brain is wired to get reward from two things: eating and having sex. And if you put them on a graph, eating a sandwich is like gives you like that much of a reward, and then takes like that long to trickle off. Blowing a load is like up there, and it takes like another hour or so as the pleasure tapers off. Heroin's like way up here, and then it drops right off.
Really?
And that's the pattern you set up for yourself. I think of it as like a God force. People were not meant biologically to feel that way. That's why it sweeps so many people up in it.
Right.
It's just it's a sensation beyond orgasm. Ain't even close. Even the best sex I've had, toe shrimping, ass spelunking, rim jobbing, 2-on-1 fucking sex, I would step over 3 weeks of that for one pin of fucking fire dope. Wow.
And you think you're just predisposed to love it, or do you think that that's generally the reaction that people have when they...
Heroin is potent enough that I think that has a higher rate of affinity. More people will get swept up in it if they dabble in it. And the other hard fact about that is if you do it for 5 days, whether you like it or not, you're going to get physically addicted to it, and you're actually going to suffer coming off it. So But I've always been like an addict type. Like I said, my first drink, I knew I'm going to do this every free minute that I get.
Right. But so you were saying earlier when we were talking about, you were saying you've never really been addicted to coke or meth or anything like that. But what was it? You were... Do you think it was because you were bipolar? Do you think it because you had too much energy and you were just looking for something to turn you down? What was it that like drew you to it so intensely, like Vicodins and then heroin and everything?
The booze shut off. That I always had this black current of like, it felt like I was being like electrified 24 hours a day. From the minute I woke up, it felt like a black current of fucking energy running through me. The drugs I like turned that off and just gave me a break from that. This like jet roar of fucking darkness in my fucking head that was like unremitting. But when I do coke and stuff like that,
So it wasn't just a roar; it was a roar of darkness. Like the way that you've always felt your whole life. You felt as there was like a clear physical current of that.
Yeah, my whole life. I'm waiting for them to discover like something genetic, like that. Maybe it's just in some people or something. Maybe it was rooted in the bipolar. Maybe it was my, I wasn't particularly fond of my childhood experiences. These things all sort of roll together. But like coke and stuff like that made me even more edgy. And like, like I didn't want to go near that. And meth, I never even tried. I have to admit, I never went near that because, like I said, I didn't really try drugs. The booze stifled all that pitchforks in the head, and then heroin was just like, not heroin, Vicodin and those pills were like a purer, cleaner, longer, less destructive, because you could take one, you'd feel like a 6-beer buzz for like 8 hours, except it was a 6-beer buzz times 10.
You were drinking on all this stuff too? Because
at the beginning.
It's super dangerous to be drinking when you're on fucking Vicodins and all that stuff too. You ever have issues with that, overdosing or anything?
No, that's the crazy thing. I used to, when I was doing dope, especially when I crossed over and started slamming it, I've only OD'd like 4 times in my whole life. I always had tolerance with that I actually talked to a doctor about it, and he's like, everybody's constitution is different, because there was this guy when I started doing Oscar, I started doing OCs, he was actually my first connection. He had been doing it for like a year, every day, and he would chew half a 40, and he'd be on my couch all nodding out. I'd chew 5 80s, and be like, let's paint the house, let's fucking write a song, let's do it. Yeah, we'll write it. And he'd like be nodding out, like it was just different human physiologies, I guess.
So you sort of,
I always had a real high tolerance.
If it has that impact on you, then... like where you can be creative, where you can fight. Because I think, honestly, especially a lot of people I see in Hollywood, they seem like a lot of really productive people who actually go out and get a lot of shit done, like especially in like the movie business, the music world or whatever. They're fucking abusing coke. They're abusing the fuck out of uppers. But then these just so happen to be the people who are able to sort of harness that energy and allow it to let them work their asses off. And it's certainly probably not the best decision long term. But I think a lot of like really successful people are people who can sort of harness drugs and be able to use them to their benefit.
Sure, they're riding the storm.
It's not something that people want to talk about because it's weird to like glamorize like the people who are using uppers to be able to get shit done. But I think that is how it ends up working for a lot of people.
Oh, I've heard it's pervasive in Hollywood, and I'm talking about amongst the movers and shakers, not just the faces. But I guess you'd basically in that case be talking about functional addicts. As long as they can manage it, they will keep managing it. And the thing is, people don't. It's like that line in fucking Trainspotting. There's all that horror attached to drugs, but people don't do it if they don't get something out of it.
Right.
There's got to be something they're getting out of it that they're not getting somewhere else, because otherwise the horror would, of course, drive them right out of it. They feel they're getting something out of it. A lot of people do use them utilitarianly, like you said, keep a certain attitude, keep a certain perspective. Bipolar and creativity has been connected since. I mean, they've known about that forever.
Right.
And creativity and bipolar are directly connected to drug abuse. Going back to like Cates was, a fucking absinthe drinking maniac, and Sherlock Holmes. I mean, he's a fictional character, but he was based off of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He was a fucking chasing the dragon, opium fiend, and
Hitler was a meth head, right?
There's a lot of interesting stuff about him.
But there was a shitload of people on amphetamines back then, and there was like not much of a cultural stigma about it.
Not at all.
Right? Yeah.
Not at all. Coke was you could rob a pharmacy and get some coke until like the late 70s.
Really?
They finally got rid of that. Freud, the first god of mental health, prescribed cocaine for depression. Because it made you feel really good for 15 minutes. He just didn't think about the come down. He was a coke addict himself. He used to shoot himself up. I've heard that Hitler's doctor used to shoot him up with cocaine.
Really?
And it'd shoot him up with barbiturates to put him to sleep. So he was riding an emotional roller coaster. Problem is, he was at the helm of the destiny of millions of people, so that's really destructive. My roller coaster just fucked me up.
Was there a moment where you hit rock bottom, in your opinion, where like you really like first started to make attempts at getting clean or anything?
I tried on and off for years before the final. It was the end of 2006, that final Ramallah tour after my time out in Detroit. That was the last time I was strung out. When I got back from that, I gave myself 1 year of, I'm going to get clean, and I'm going to stay clean, and I'm going to do all the mental health shit they tell you that's got to go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not better after a year, I'm going to shoot myself. And if I feel better, I'm going to go with it. And it worked. But you know, it's funny. The drugs were just symptomatic of the depression. I knew that my whole life. Like I knew that my whole fucking life.
So you always knew that even if you went clean, that it wouldn't.
Oh, that was the pattern. I would get clean, and 6 months later, I would be thinking about putting my head in the oven again. And nobody really wants to die.
And you're sort of like, well, if I'm going to be depressed, I might as well be nursing this fucking habit.
Bingo.
At least it's a little more exciting.
Yep, and there's some relief.
More active. You're more taking the reins of it, right?
Yep, and it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't, because
Right.
most people don't want to die. And and there's also the intermittent relief of the high itself, whether from alcohol, meth, or whatever anybody else is doing. You at least have that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with unremittent depression anyway, you talk yourself into doing a drug again because you at least get some kick here and there.
Right.
Yeah, man, that was it for me right there.
All right. So Ramallah, is this directly related to 9/11, and like what was it that you wanted to say to the world with this band?
Ramallah was started during a time when Blood for Blood was inactive, and I wanted to do something else. It wasn't specifically, the idea wasn't to, people used to call it political, but I just thought it was making fun of American pop culture at the time, and it really wasn't about politics. It was about that this was a real, that was a really ugly time, and everybody, all they cared about was Britney Spears shaving her head. So it was like an assault on
There's like
pop
that,
culture.
There was that to distract everybody, but then meanwhile you have like this rising tide of nationalism, and then you also have this like the first time that you really start to think about like, oh, like Islam might destroy the world.
Yeah, there was all this stuff swirling, and it seemed like everybody just wanted to drool vicariously through celebrity worship.
Just because there was nothing. Yeah, it's like finally like we have something to really confront, but meanwhile we've like basically gotten rid of like religion as a reason to exist. It's like now we have Britney Spears shaving her head.
Yeah, that was really at the worship of celebrity
and consumerism. Yeah, that's like the ultimate like moment, because it's like we didn't have anything to turn to besides
that's what everybody turned to for their blanket. That was what at the time Ramallah was sort of taking a whack at.
Right.
That whole time period. It wasn't like I didn't set out like I'm going to make a political statement or whatever. I always tried to keep music personal to me and not get too esoteric.
But that was stuff that you felt like you had to say
At the time, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
I remember seeing you guys play the ICC on your first shows. Was it your first show, or was it just one of the first?
That might have been the first
in
weekend.
Austin?
Yeah.
I think it might have been on a Tuesday or something.
That little church basement.
Yep.
Did Terra play that show?
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah,
And it was probably one of the first Terror shows, too, or at least, like, in Boston.
Yeah, it would have been early.
Super early, like, off the demo, or maybe the first album.
Yeah, because that was right around... Terror was one of the first tours bands Blood for Blood took out when we first had our opportunity to take a band out. Terror, and that was right around that time.
Terror might be my next hardcore interview.
Oh, fucking A. With Scott? Scott
I haven't talked to Scott. I talked to Martine.
Martine's the fucking
Sound
man.
and Fury.
He's a good fucking dude.
So if you're still tuned into us right now, an
if you
hour
got
and
through
13
this-
minutes in, drop a comment on Blood for Blood, or on Tara's Instagram or something, and tell him to do No Jumper.
And tell him to do the Nodcast, too.
For sure, that, yeah.
Did this fucking thing shut off?
Oh, it just finally did? Oh, perfect. I can go take a piss. All right, we're back. Fuck. You remember what we were talking about?
Where we let off was the last thing that I heard on that was about Ramallah, just being sort of an attack on American pop culture versus any sort of political stance.
Oh, yeah. So this is my memory from that show at the fucking Alston Church, was that, I've been going to a lot of Boston shows at that time, and then you guys came out and played, and this is like the first time I ever seen you guys play, and I saw a whole fucking shitload of older dudes that I hadn't seen around, or at least hadn't seen in a long time, just brutalizing kids in the crowd. So did this play out exactly as I imagined? That, like, you know, you got on the horn at a certain point and we're like, hey, we got to make a big impact as far as Boston show. I need some fucking skulls cracked.
I never
Specifically requested it?
The only time I specifically did anything like that was when Citizen Saints was playing one of our first shows. I just asked a couple of guys to come out and stand up front. And if any of the really zealous, because like we were talking about earlier, when you step outside the color within the lines with hardcore.
So you thought you might get attacked for branching out?
Yeah, I thought, or at least
really,
like heckled to the point where I would have to respond. I was like, just drag them out if they do anything. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. But that was that one show. I was like, I wonder. I just didn't know.
People probably already had a pretty good idea that you guys weren't people to fuck with at that point, right? Or did
in Boston, yeah.
Information didn't travel that fast at the time, maybe.
Yeah, that would be post-internet. Maybe not. I mean, I remember back then the big thing was the mullet board. You remember that?
I remember mullet board before B9, yeah.
Yep, yeah.
I used to look at Lamb Goat.
Then. Lamb Goat, yep.
Lamb Goat was like more metal hinged.
Lamb Goat now is the cesspool of the fucking internet.
Wow, I would love to look at it. I probably haven't looked at it in 10 years.
Oh, man. I don't understand how it's like. This is the thing. I ain't ranking on fucking Lamb Goat, the site, because the people that run that site...
It's just a news site.
Yeah, they work their asses off to put out a ton of content for bands that otherwise aren't going to get their content put out anywhere. So I respect and appreciate that. But the sexless, pasty-faced, fish-belly white, mayonnaise-sucking...
The comments.
First post. By the way, this band's gay. First post, by the way. And they fight for it. Oh, second post. I'm like... Everything's gay, but you're here spending... I can track you, motherfucker. I know what you've been doing if I look... You've been on here for 72 hours straight.
You ever have that experience where you hunted somebody down off the internet and fucking beat the shit out of them?
There was... There's
definitely like a lot of stories from that era of like Blood for Blood sort of... You know, the late 90s to like early 2000s was when a lot of people started to have to reckon with, myself included, with dealing with the results of shit they said on the internet.
That shit used to go on. The only people I ever kept on a list was certain levels of reviewers. I just kept their name in my head. I actually, fortunately, never ran into any of them. And it wasn't because of a bad review. I don't give a fuck about that. That means literally nothing to me. It's if they...
Question like your character in it?
Credibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
This is fake. Nobody lived like this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, you noodle salad, fucking eating honky. Don't fucking... I remember the first bad review we got was from this fanzine down in Florida. And the kid actually wrote, it was just to spit my last breath, like, nobody's this depressed. Anybody this depressed would have already killed themselves, which I wish these guys would do. This is so fake. These guys are just trying to be sad and mad. And the thing was... The lyrics I put into Spit My Last Breath were the closest to, like, actually the lyrics to the song Spit My Last Breath were from an aborted suicide note. And at the time I thought, this is the one place I can say this shit, the hardcore scene. I didn't know that this world's within.
Right.
And to have somebody react like that, first of all, that I was like, I'm going to kill this person. But the second thing was, the fanzine was full of, like, recipes for, like, vegan brownies.
Oh my god!
And I'm not.
So we can all imagine, like anyone who's around at this time can completely imagine what the zine looked like and what the person who made it looked like.
Yep, and the bands they liked.
Yeah,
we would Big Pants, Bigger Loser would have had big fucking floppy pants, a backpack in the pit, doing that stupid
so
thing.
We're talking like real deal, like militant, straight edge, vegan, 1997 type kid.
Yeah, not the militant straight edge so much as the artsy fartsy thing. We always had a really good straight edge contingent.
Right.
Part of that was the aggression of the music, and a lot of them I would ask them, I was like, you're really like militantly straight edge. How do you reconcile the Blood for Blood thing? They would often say, it's real. It's real.
And you're kind of like, it's a testament to like why being straight edge might be a good idea.
I say that
enough Blood for Blood. Yeah.
Fucking hey, I actually say that before any of the songs on the subject of addiction. I always send it out to straight edge kids and say, if you stay, I'm not. I make it a point to say I'm not being snide or sarcastic. This is going out to all the straight edge people, because if you stay straight edge, you don't ever got to find out what a word of this song's about, and you're right to reject it. Like, there's nothing here. This is not a fucking fun club to be a part of. But it was vegan brownies and a 3-part installment of this person's experiences traveling abroad for their Rhodes Scholarship in Europe.
Oh my God.
I was like,
So you immediately know that they're rich.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. Well, that
So
was the other thing.
transparent.
I mean, this was like obvious. My time in Paris, where I studied at the Louvre and blah blah blah.
my God.
I was like, you have no idea my life experiences, and I didn't have anything to do with theirs. I was like, but you're not qualified to judge.
Yeah.
You got no fucking right. And that's all a fanzine was back then. People forget that. 60 fanzines back then just meant 60 rich kids were into your band.
Right.
And that would build hype. We were never in any of those fanzines unless a record label sent them free disc and they'd rank on it. But that's all that meant. That would build hype back then. We never had the hype. We just filled the crowds. That's all. We filled the clubs.
Beautiful.
Fuck. Great vegan brownies. I was like, wow. What a social crusader.
Was there a moment like where you really started to feel like maybe hardcore had lost its way, like in terms of where it sort of became directly intertwined with like extremist leftist politics, maybe towards like the early 2000s and stuff like that?
I would have checked out by then.
Okay.
I wouldn't have I haven't actively followed anything that's been going on. I mean, if a band, if I bumped into a band or if I liked it or whatever, but I wasn't actively paying too much attention around that time. Like I said, the time that I thought was the silliest when, that's why we were talking about once and we were laughing about it. Like, I don't have a problem with emo, because that's just those kids being those kids. Whereas I remember the days, I said this before, but when I was out in Detroit, there was 666 Day, June 6, 2006, and somehow Slayer got involved with it somehow. And it was this big, they turned it into Anti-Emo Day, grr,
Right.
Angry Evil Metal Day. And I remember I was out in Detroit, and that's a badass fucking scene out there, some crazy motherfuckers out there, and I was kind of arguing with them, some of the guys that I was hanging around with out there, just joking around, but like, dude, I got a problem with emo. They'd be like, no, it's weak. I'm like, yeah, but that's what those kids are supposed to be into. They're not supposed to be writing songs about fucking killing people and stuff like that. They're dorky suburban white kids. That's what they're supposed to write songs about their girlfriends and being heartbroken and stuff. That's their experience. Would you rather it be the 90s again when they were coming to hardcore shows and pretending that they was mafia enforcers and stuff like that?
Right.
That's what I remembered.
Like if you care about street level hardcore, then like you should be happy. Or like same thing with rap. Like if you like gangster rap, you should probably be happy that there's like a Chance the Rapper and a J. Cole and a Kendrick Lamar, so that not to say that Kendrick Lamar's not a gangster, I shouldn't throw him in that category, but you should be happy that there's a duplicity to the scene or a duality, so that there is something for people to go into. Because when I look back at 50 Cent era hip hop, it's like the gangsterdom was so prominent that you had no hope of making it unless you had some kind of gangster narrative, some kind of being shot narrative, and it just drove people to fake it. And
Yes. If that's all that's going to be rewarded, that's all people will try to be.
Right.
I actually, somebody put up a fucking post to an article, right, that was about a closed door industry decision with the advent of gangster rap to no longer support and promote the political stuff like Public Enemy. And it was amazing to me because I always thought that was part of the evil phlebitis-ridden white guy's plan, was
Right.
to sell what they perceive to be the most destructive yet least likely to come up and bite them and want money or a bigger piece of the profits. To bands like Public Enemy, they were already saying, where's all this money going? Why aren't we
Yeah.
getting more of this? They were agitating for bigger piece and stuff
Right.
like that.
You could definitely see
To find out it was true blew my mind. I
The
was like,
only question to me is whether it was an implicit agreement or if
in the wind.
it was just a straight decision made. Because to me, I can imagine, having been around enough record labels, that at a certain point you're just gonna realize like, oh, fucking gangster shit sells more than political shit.
Sure.
Same. You could probably draw the same conclusion about almost any music.
Oh, for
'cause
sure.
the most popular punk rock songs of all time are not the political songs for the most part.
For sure.
But that's I feel like I saw that article you're talking about, and like that's the interesting part, is like how explicit they made it.
Yeah,
they didn't
that's
wanna
the
support
real
that.
question, because stuff like that, I mean, that stuff just blows in the wind, and nobody. It's like that part in the what's that guy's fucking name? Oliver Stone's JFK. Nothing's ever spoken. It's just blowing in the wind. The conspiracy, the plan, and stuff like that. Now, obviously, that's a tenuous analogy, but I do wonder if some evil Dr. Claw, fucking au fait white guy, put the word out. This is the decision. But I love what's going on. That's why I love what's been going on the last 10 years with underground hip hop, and it's rapidly becoming not underground hip hop. A lot of these kids are blowing up.
It's becoming so big that there's room for almost everything under it, and I feel like it's even going to get more exaggerated.
Oh, that'll always happen.
I feel like we're going to see like real conservative hip hop come out, because now you have gangster hip hop that's popular, you have really woke conscious hip hop that's popular.
That's been, we used to call that backpack rap. That's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But now
spreading. That's the most popular rap. J. Cole, Kendrick, Chance the Rapper, etc. It was basically like woke conscious rap.
Sure.
And now it's the biggest rap. Whereas like you see somebody like 21 Savage or a fucking, a fucking Gucci Mane or whatever. It's like those guys are popular, but they're not popular on the level that these other guys are.
Well, I remember when 50 Cent said if Kanye's album outsold him, he was going to quit the business.
That was a turning point.
That was also a promotional.
Whole,
yeah, it really was. That was a promotional mistake, because that was in the wind that Kanye was at that time was going to outsell him. It was just time.
That was the end of 50's career in a certain sense, because there was no way for him to come back from that after he clowned Tight Pants so hard, and then all of a sudden it became obvious that no, Tight Pants are more relevant than like you wearing a 3X white tee.
And a bulletproof vest.
Bulletproof vest. That was a weird era.
But I that was one of those tipping points. But I love what's been going on, because at least from what I can see, and I don't digest it like a fan on the ground. Some of the music I love, but I also monitor it analytically. It seems like a lot of these kids, they don't give a fuck what they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. They don't care what this, they're not putting on the old uniform. They're being whatever they want to be. Right. That's an exciting time, because one of the things I always loved about hip hop was, no matter, even during the height of the years that it was purely gangsta, the music was always still super innovative.
Right.
The sounds themselves were always super fresh.
Yeah.
And the deliveries were always super fresh, even if the content had started to get somewhat redundant. To my ears, that was always, the sounds itself was fresh. Now the lyrics are as wide a bandwidth and broadband as the sounds. That's just plain exciting.
Right. To what extent do you bother to go to hardcore shows? To what extent, how do you feel when you go in one, when you're playing or anything like that? Like, how does the scene still feel to you? Because you're like someone who, for life, you're tied to it, regardless of if you ever go to a show again. You're forever going to consider that sort of your people.
Sure.
Even if you might not really have any interest in going to shows.
When I go to shows themselves, for whatever reason, if like a friend's band's playing, or like my brother drags me to one or something like that, I spend most of the time crawling out of my skin, eyeing the bar like, should I? As far as playing the shows, though, I never think about it till I'm actually at the show, like playing with Ramallah or whatever. I love it, because I look around and these are all the people and faces that have been with me through the worst and best times of my life. But I also love looking into the audience, because it ain't just old faces. When I see young people there, I'm like, holy shit. I mean, that makes sense if you consider the lyrical content. Of course, there's going to be new kids like that every year. I'm just glad that it still reaches some of them. Some of them, it's like kind of going to the well. It's kind of renewing. Mm-hmm. Actually being but that's the thing. Like, that's always been the case with me. I remember somebody saying, how can you bear to get on stage in front of thousands of people and talk the way you talk? I'd be terrified. And I'd be like, I'd be terrified standing in that audience of 4,000 people. I'd be going out of my fucking skin.
Right, that's more comfortable for you?
Oh, yeah, being on stage, it's on my terms.
Is that just because you have been lucky enough to be in that position from early on, that you've like worked? Was there never a chance that you were going to be just a participant and not a creator in terms of hardcore from early on?
I don't know.
You don't think you would have lasted as a fan?
Oh, I think I would have. No, I think I would have drifted away.
I think I start creating, right?
Yeah, that was always going to be part of it. Whether it resonated or not, like I said, the compulsion to do the music was actually there for as long as any interest in it, and I never understood it. I still don't entirely understand it, but yeah, I would have, because I've over the course of the years, especially as I strip substances out of my life and try to gain some measure of quiet in my own fucking frontal lobe. I get more and more reclusive and introverted.
Right.
So I think I would have eventually got to the point where I wasn't being part of the social element as much.
Even though it probably helped you indulge in crime and drugs and girls and all the good shit in life, do you feel like to a certain extent it protected you from going down a worse path with hardcore? Like, do you think it saved you in a way, or did it make things worse?
Yeah, no, for sure. Better across the board. It got me out of the projects, and I was going fucking nowhere there. I was doing everything. Everybody was around me, and I wasn't even questioning why. We would break into cars and take everything out of them, or steal them and joyride. And we had this idea, we're going to sell this stuff, and we're going to sell hot bar. We never did. There was no real motive. I was doing it because everybody around me was doing it, and I would have probably got strung out earlier. The hardcore punk thing has always acted as a stabilizing influence because it never accommodated the heroin thing.
Right.
It did accommodate the booze. That's part of it. Not for everybody. Like, there's a straight edge contingent, but...
But was your heroin addiction a secret?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
absolute secret
from the
agent.
band, too, or just the fans?
Always a secret, even from the band, as best as I could. They knew what I was doing, but they never knew the extent.
Right.
I was an utter secret agent addict.
So you'd be on tour and still
sneaking off.
finding ways to do it.
Yep, because that's the thing. You can't find it at the shows. No kids.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, no strung-out addict is going to do anything but be a strung-out addict. They're not going to be going to shows anyway.
Definitely not going there in mosh pit.
No, you could find somebody that might have a handful of Xanax or a handful of codeine or something like that, and I would exploit those resources. But like I said, like what I would usually do is when I got to a show, wherever, and I did this across the country and across Europe, find the promoter and say, is there an area within 2 miles of here where if I go there, I have a chance of being shot? And they'd be like, yeah, this area, you don't want to go there. And I'd be like, write that down. And I just slip off and go cop.
And how often would this turn bad? And how often would it just go great?
There were a lot of times where you don't find nothing. I was also lucky back at that time because there was still open air drug markets. I don't know how it is the rest of the country, but Boston, I've heard, like Charlestown, there's no open air drug markets.
Right,
no more.
you can't stand outside the corner store and sell crack anymore, right?
That's exactly it. You have to have a connect.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, I've heard that there's still some areas in Hyde Park where you can just walk around and you'll find it. And if you're really devoted, you just walk.
You could see it.
Yeah,
Somebody's eyes.
people's
Right?
eyes. Yeah, it's like an invisible dance. You can just see it going around. You can see it in somebody's face, their carriage. I used to just walk around and sort of eye people, and they'd eventually just. It's almost like when I watched that movie about that gay artist Joe Orton, he would just go around and know somebody was gay and follow them. It's like that, like you just see it in somebody's eyes. But I don't know what it would be like now. But often, I wouldn't get what I wanted, and then I'd just be sick on the road, and everybody would hate my guts and just think I was the most miserable, edgy bitch on earth.
Right.
But it would blew up in my face many times.
So probably a lot of, I know that you're sort of sworn to secrecy to certain parts, like both literally and just because you feel like you shouldn't talk about other people's dirty laundry. But what happened with the whole Buddha thing, and did you know beforehand that like he was had some kind of issues with girls in general? I guess you could say.
I'll just put it like this: once the allegations came out, a lot of people came forth with similar experiences. Not children, not anybody underage, but he could be forthright with women. This isn't anything I'm divulging. This was something that was clearly evident
like
on tour.
reported and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And oftentimes, it was, caused some waves from time to time. Some talk. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it wasn't. But as far as that final thing, what that incident, we had no idea. That actually happened about 6 weeks before the show.
Right.
Those final shows that we were going to do. It was actually not the final shows. It was going to be the first of a whole wave of shows and a new album, Story of My Life with Music. We didn't know until the week before.
Right.
A bunch of other people did, and they finally came to us and told us what had happened.
And it came out publicly, and so what was that like for you as somebody who clearly you were in the position where those accusations might reflect on you and the rest of the band, right?
For sure. It killed me to hear people talking about taking cheese graters to their blood for blood tattoos. Because for about fucking 15 years, that was the hardcore uniform tattoo, that blood for blood skull, and then people were talking about shaving them off. That killed me because I wrote all the music and lyrics. As my music, a story of my life. So with the limited, I had been away at that point for 6-7 years, like underground, and just had disappeared. So I didn't have any platform or anything. But to anybody that would listen I'd say that music's as viable to yesterday as it is today. This is
Right.
not a new day. If that music and those lyrics meant anything to you, particularly the lyrics, yesterday, they're still as sincere and unimpugned today as they were yesterday.
Right.
That was the part that was hardest about me. The whole situation with Buddha broke my heart. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't gloat about it. I wish it didn't happen. We were becoming pretty tight again, too. We were getting past some of the past and stuff. The whole thing was just heartbreaking. Yeah, I think sometimes anybody that watches the podcast gets the impression that I have some sort of hostility towards Blood for Blood or the guys or whatever. That's not the case at all. My only hostility is with the creative end of it. I want it to be clear to people that lives and dies by me and nobody else.
Right.
That's part of what I'm doing now with Ramallah, getting up there and playing a set of Blood for Blood songs with Ramallah. Recording music that would have been on the Lost Blood for Blood albums had in an alternate timeline. I all these years, I hid from the fact that I was in Blood for Blood. I ducked it. I just would do new bands.
Right.
I wanted to stand on my own merit. I didn't want to stand under the umbrella of the biggest commercial success that I had had.
Right.
I was the Roger Waters of Pink Floyd.
Because that's the temptation, is to like just keep doing shit under Blood for Blood. That's where you have the platform. Why give it up? Like,
that's got the huge guarantees, fucking
Right.
huge guarantees.
and when Sinners and Saints or Ramallah, it's like all of a sudden you got to start working up your amount of money. Your draws.
Starting totally over again. The check drops a zero, sometimes 2 zeros.
Yeah.
But that's how much the credibility of the music meant to me.
Damn, you guys were doing pretty good at a certain point. If you lost 2 zeros, though, what? You had 5-figure shows.
The guarantees that
overseas and stuff.
Yeah, the guarantees that what would 5? Yeah, 5 figures. The guarantees that I get offered weekly to redo Under Blood for Blood. Somebody with teeth like me should not be turning them down.
Because the festival scene is still a thriving thing, right? And is it mostly overseas? Or?
No. A lot of them. I mean, some of them are for festivals around here, but I don't want to throw a figure in it because it sounds like bragging, but it's up there with any bands that are still viable,
Right.
that are guitar and drum based.
Because to them, that's a big look, is like to be able to bring in the band that hasn't toured in 5 years or whatever. Yeah.
Hell yeah. I will do it again if I can, but I got to do what I need to do first. I need to prove. I don't want to hide under the name. I need to prove that the music itself is more important than the fucking name.
Right.
I need to prove that the lyrics and the story that was told is still viable, and I want to finish the story. But I have been, the new stuff that's coming, it would be on the new Blood for Blood album,
Right.
which is going to come out with Ramallah, because there's no difference. Like,
Yeah.
I used to assign the songs after the fact anyway.
So in your mind, you're never going to put out Blood for Blood as an album ever again. It'll always be Ramallah now, but you'll still do Blood for Blood live.
No, actually, I talked to Ian quite a bit, and there's some things we've talked about doing. I'm just going to do this first.
Okay.
But if Blood for Blood happens later, I would gladly go back. I would gladly rescue from the ashes, but I need to do this for myself first. This is the thing, like, when I deal with labels and stuff like that, you know, I never cared about money when it's in Blood for Blood. We always broke up everything 3 ways. Even though I wrote all the music lyrics, came up with all the designs, everything we sold as product was creatively from me. I never cared. The money wasn't important to me, so share up. Share small, share all, share big, share all. The problem is there's a flip side to that. When I don't feel like doing it, you can't buy me. And that's where I'm at now. I got to do this stuff first.
Right.
But I am open to doing Blood for Blood again. I'd love to save that legacy, but the first step to it is to prove that the name and that skull is not the most important part of it. The music and the lyrics are.
Right.
And I'm doing that by doing what I'm doing with Ramallah.
It's crazy because hardcore is so different than rap because it has a long memory. And like a kid getting into hardcore loves, like, there's a fetishization of like Bold or Youth of Today, and it extends to you guys and your whole generation too. Do you still, like, it's almost kind of shocking to be able to go play a show and still have people this many years later still have, like, know the words to all your songs and everything like that?
Yeah, it really is. It's that is mind blowing. There's just no way around it. Because in so many other scenes, if you don't put on an album for 6 months, you sink without a trace.
Right, yeah.
Even if that album was gold, gone. And it's funny you mentioned that earlier when we were talking about hip hop, that a lot of the young guys not only don't know the lineage and the DNA that led to them, but even if they are vaguely aware of it, they want to reject it.
Yes.
They want to pretend that it starts with me and it ends with me.
To them, like, to a lot of these young kids, like a Lil Uzi Vert, who will like, say, you know, I'm a rock star. I don't even care about rap. I'm a rock star now. Like that, like my buddy Anthony Fantano described this as like rap's punk rock moment, where like, you know, what was the Sex Pistols' reaction to like the Beatles?
Oh, yeah, Pink Floyd,
Right, and that's
the
what
Beatles, the Stones on stage tuning.
Right. So rap now is like a rejection of all lyricism, and not all, but you know, to a certain extent, like a lot of these young rappers, they want to reject everything and be able to like kind of start from scratch and still be able to be considered hip hop.
Part of that, you know, is necessary for any honest artist. You have to have this belief that I don't care what came before. It's all about what I'm doing. That kind of, it's part of it's megalomaniacal.
Yeah. But
the very act of creating something that you think somebody else will understand and will resonate with them is kind of megalomaniacal to begin with. I think that's fresh as fuck.
Well,
but you can't escape the fact that you came from somewhere.
Right. But at a certain point, everybody wants to kill their dad, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the best movements in music are the ones that are a direct rejection of what came right before them.
Right.
I mean, the entire Seattle thing, the grunge thing, was a fuck you to that. Let's go to the rock. Let's go to the fucking drive-in and make out glam thing. Daddy's car and, you know, dressing as girls and all that weird ass shit that became so codified and sold so many records.
But that's the question with hip hop is that rejection, like, because now when we're looking at rap, like if rap rejects traditional hip hop and then like sort of takes on a new identity, and that identity still somehow falls within hip hop, then all of a sudden the genre has gotten so big and all encompassing that everything can kind of fall under it.
Oh yeah,
you know, which is the bizarre thing that I feel like is taking place.
It's the constant war between purity of aesthetics and originality and flair within the framework of some kind of musical movement or style or genre.
It's like sometimes to a certain extent, sometimes as a son, you want to make more money than your father, and you want to take on his same standards and do better than him. But then maybe the next generation after that wants to destroy those standards and be a fucking crackhead who like lives on the street, or at the very least, you know, sits in the basement and smokes weed all the time and plays video games. Now we're sort of seeing that, and it's all playing out on the same stage in a way.
I think it's the kind of eternal war in music between fantasy and reality. My end of music is pure reality based. It's militant. It's got to be about my experience, and that's how I've connected with other people. But there's room in music for the opposite end. I'd like to be this. I aspire to this. I want to pretend to be. Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
reveling in your own state,
transcending your own self. There's room for that. The problem is, at least with rock and roll based stuff and mainstream hip hop up until relatively recently, it tipped too far. The image, the thematic apperception test. This is what I would like to be rather than what I actually am. It went too far there. It's got to have sort of a balance, but it's that thing like black metal that was fresh when it first came out, and then you've got these bands coming up like Dima Borgir and Cradle of Filth that are doing really interesting things sonically, but because they're doing interesting things sonically, they're rejected by the core base. That narrows and retreats, and pretty soon everything sounds exactly the same. It's like an oscillating wave. But I think it's one way or the other. I think it's an exciting time for hip hop. And I noticed something else. This is like utterly off the topic, but it's kind of on the topic.
Yeah, that's good.
What do they call it stuff? Dubstep, the big
EDM shit.
Yeah, that type of stuff.
Dance music, which you also had a lot to say about back in the day with the Blood for Blood and stuff, because that was early era American rave culture. It was like 96, 97. People started doing ecstasy and shit. So you took aim at that a lot too.
Oh, for sure. But I noticed something recently. I didn't know what dubstep was. I thought I really didn't know, and I checked it out online. This is a couple of years ago now. But I realized something sonically. It's super played out now, but when it first hit, it was heavier than most of the stuff that's defined as extreme heavy music.
Yeah.
There was a power, an energy, a depth, a hugeness that it was immediately revealing. You didn't need to be explained why you need to react to this. You know, just felt it. Boom, crack, boom. The other night at the No Jumper fucking show, those drops. Boom, boom. And then you take an album, I won't say a band's name, but some super technical death metal band that's supposed to be the heaviest, most extreme thing, and you pop it in and it's jump, 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 yeah. That's not human noise anymore.
Yeah.
And if I played that for my grandmother, she wouldn't be scared of that. She'd be like,
Right.
what is that?
Yeah.
But if I played her those big fucking drops, she'd be like, oh my God, that's heavy.
Like black metal is heavy thematically and aesthetically. It's intimidating. It's aggressive. But then if you watch the effect that it has on like a group of people, that's what's the weird thing that I always thought about too, is that there's a whole spectrum of aggressive music, and hardcore is clearly not on either end of the spectrum, but it's what a lot of people, myself and yourself included, were drawn to. And it's like, what was it in me? Because, you know, I found out about like punk and ska and shit like that before I found out about hardcore. But then once I found out about hardcore, I went in the direction of listening to black metal and death metal and grindcore and stuff, but then ultimately like swung back to like Blood for Blood and Hatebreed.
And going to those shows, that shit made me want to kick people in the head
Right.
when it would hit.
Right.
I think there's a physiological reason for this, and I've studied this my whole fucking life. It's why I choose to write, because Ramallah and Blood for Blood are not the fastest, they're not the heaviest, they're not the most detuned, but they get a fucking reaction live.
Yeah.
And some of the extreme forms of metal right now, like you just mentioned, or the blast,
Yeah.
faster, 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 harder, harder, harder. Well, that doesn't emulate any human physiological state. But a beat like this, elevated heart rate, panic, anxiety, tension, the big bust, release, rage, wrath, explosion, fucking. It's like
Yeah.
fucking. It mimics human physiological states better than any other music.
Right.
When it's done right. When it's
Yeah.
done right. And a lot of this fucking hip hop does the same thing, coming from this sort of boom, boom, release, rage, wrath, sex, all these things. The sped up stuff, like I said, imitates tension, anxiety, panic. These are the music's any styles of music that most succinctly mimic these physiological states, I think, have the biggest impact. Because I used to watch live, and it wasn't the bands with tons of double bass and stuff like that that were causing people to pop human beings up on pikes like fucking Vlad Tepes in the pit. It was bands like Clutch.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, why does that have more of a reaction? Why does it get people murdering each other more than like imitates more primal physiological responses? I think.
And with hardcore, there's a more specific, nuanced style of dancing. And that is very different from, say, like a death metal show where, like...
There's almost no... Oh, they do the horse trotter, they don't dance at all.
Right, the moshing is very, like, sporadic. It's very kind of... You know, there's not, like, much rhyme or reason to it. If you go to a punk pit, you know, it's a lot of just, like, jumping up and down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really... It's not dancing in the same way that when you see kids two-stepping, that is something that's so uniquely hardcore, and you can think it's super gay, whatever the fuck you want to say about it. Sometimes when I see the pit break out into it, when I was at Sound and Fury the other day, I'm like, man, this is weird. What the fuck is this shit? Like, and I used to do it
It's a
too.
strange subculture.
But it's a strange thing to see, especially like it turning into that after it already having been, you know, people punching the sides of the pit in the face.
Yeah.
I'm like, but this is such a uniquely extraordinary hardcore thing.
Yeah.
And that, you know, in a lot of ways, I think that pace of like a lot of hardcore bands is what a lot of like logical people, because the grindcore is the logical thing to go to if you think that like the values that matter to you in aggressive music are speed and complexity and technicality.
Yep.
It's clearly like not really like for guys like us. That's not what we wanted to go to. We wanted to go
No.
towards the thing that emulated like human emotion.
Yeah. Wrathful release,
Yeah.
letting out something inside you that you got to carry around all the time. That's not conducive to that.
There's no groove to it.
Yeah,
And
there's
if-
nothing human about
If
it.
anything, that kind of drove me away from hardcore in a lot of ways, and I've said this, and I promise I'm not just sucking your dick, but I've said this many times, is that I think that if the average hardcore band sounded more like Blood for Blood, then I would have remained more of like a lifelong hardcore fan.
Dude, thank you.
Because that was more the kind of thing that I was doing. I kind of got into hardcore. You know, I was always sort of like intrigued by a lot of the Youth Crew stuff, and I liked a lot of that aesthetically, and I liked a lot of that music. But then, like, I kind of came into going to shows a lot in maybe like 2003, 2004, where it's all on Broken Wings, mosh metal, stuff like that. And I love those dudes as people, but ultimately the music didn't really like keep me in it in the same way that I feel like I could have if I had maybe like landed at a different time in history.
Oh, for sure. That was actually one of the emails I scanned when we were talking about that, how there was so many bands that I was friends with, dear friends with, toured with, and would do anything to help them out, but couldn't say with sincerity that I loved their band.
Right.
Well, I think personally, I think one of the worst things that happened was 1990 to 1994 earache bands, which was the advent of...
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden that became, well, that's what heavy has to be. Then everybody started doing that. It trickled into punk and hard. It trickled everywhere. I mean, that became ubiquitous. That's not a human noise.
Yeah.
That's not human. It's an utter aesthetic thing going...
And don't you think it's a compensation or a defense mechanism too? Because like with your lyrics, like you could listen to a Blood for Blood song and probably at least half the words you're gonna know what the fuck you're saying the first time you listen to it.
A lot of people said that. They said
You
the
don't
most
really need a
important thing
lyric
is they
sheet.
could hear it.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what was
And
being...
don't you think the ooh is obscuring your own words to the extent that like, oh, now nobody has to know how stupid the shit I'm saying is?
For sure, that part of it.
And do you think you went in that direction vocally because you wanted people to hear what you had to say?
I definitely wanted people to be able to understand it. That's funny, you know. I never really thought about it. Me and Buddha just sort of had the voices we had. It was influenced by Biohazard.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was a deep voice versus a high. What makes us tick versus Evan and the, which is funny because every dude in hardcore between 1991 and 1995 listened to Biohazard. That was there at that time, and it's like the entire scene is done this Soviet revisionism where they've just edited out that everybody has a Biohazard tattoo.
Right. Yeah.
That was a huge thing. But I thought they were fucking incredible live, and it was a precursor. You know, the lyrics, however stylized we may have found out they were later in relation to some of the guys, it was urban, to some extent reflected who I was. I was greatly influenced by them, and that was kind of what me and Buddha would do in a lower voice and a higher voice. But I sang the way I sound if I'm having a temper tantrum. It's just anger voice. That's it. Like, and then of course, as I went on, I got more and more melodic and more ambitious sonically. But that aesthetic, it makes every band sound the same, and the voice is the human element. That's why hip-hop is ascendant right now. You are direct conduit with the artist. It's not hiding behind any extremity. Their voice is front and center. Their experience, you're getting it right in your ears. I think that's important. That was just something that happened that became kind of ground zero that I thought that was destructive, the advent of the Cookie Monster thing. Not that some bands don't do it great, some fucking damn well do. But I want to hear what you have to say. And I don't want every band to sound exactly the same. I don't need a base level of, well, that's not heavy if it's not like that. I'll decide myself. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think I just got totally esoteric there for a second.
No, this is good. I like hearing you examine your own sound. All right, so we could do a 4-hour interview right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna try to like throttle it around here, around the 2-hour mark. But this is my last question, and I guarantee that we're gonna be doing podcasts in the future again. But this is
Dude, I would love to. I told you those
my pleasure.
emails. Somebody's gonna fucking publish them someday.
We'll probably have a series of White Trash Rob podcasts for the rest of my life. I'd like that at the very least, every time I come back and do Christmas with my family or whatever, that every time it's just a reunion. We could come up with a brand name for it at some point. It'll be the Rob and Adam fucking...
These are some of the most interesting conversations and correspondences I've had in fucking years.
I appreciate that.
No, for real.
My podcast with the Incendiary guys that I did recently.
I gotta check that out. I heard good things about it, and you said it went really well as well.
Yeah,
but I heard from a bunch of people saying you got to check that out.
Oh, really?
People, yes.
See, on a personal level, like that was one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had on camera, and just like this one too, where it's like there's something about like I know rap so well, and that there's like a certain element of hardcore that I still find fascinating to try to like get to the root of like what really kind of makes it happen or why it exists. Like, and that with the dude Brendan, who's like a really good lifelong friend of mine for like probably about the last 10 years or so, to be able to have that conversation with him or you, it's like I fucking love it. You know?
I like being able to because you haven't come from it all, experienced it all, but also having such roots in other areas of music, I could speak a little more objectively and have a little bit of distance. And right off the bat, we went right to dispensing with pretense. Like I was laughing, like I said, about that email about the bands that I was friends with that I wasn't as wild about, stuff like that. We used to been there.
Yeah. All right. So this is my last question: is when you think about what you need to do on Earth before you die, what comes to mind? Is it music? Is it a state of mind that you want to get to, a state of tranquility that I'm assuming that you don't have a whole lot of hope for being able to achieve?
I'd like to be, I mean, this is like the dweebiest, weediest fucking answer. I'd like to maintain a level of peace, personal peace, because then I don't gotta, when I got that, I ain't thinking about booze or drugs or anything like that. And that was what drove me to the booze and drugs my entire life, was just an absolute symptom of the turmoil. Yeah, the drugs and booze exacerbated the turmoil, and I couldn't see that at the time. But they were absolutely just a byproduct. They were not ground zero. Ground zero was the jet raw, the blackness in my own, the rotten blackness in my own fucking skull. But if there's one thing that I'm still feel compelled to do, all the people I reached before, and it's especially important to me right now, is finish the story. Because I think when I was younger with Blood for Blood and Ramallah and shit, I promised to live a certain way, reject certain things, laid out a certain path. A lot of people found it appealing. A lot of people resonated with a lot of people. I gotta tell them where it led. I shouldn't be alive. The fact that I am, if there's one thing that I could comically do to settle some of my own accounts, it would be finish the blanks for some of these people. There's so many addicts out there. There's so many traumatized people. I believe fucking a lot of people that are inherently good do evil and bad things, and it doesn't make them inherently evil and bad. I also consequently believe that there's some people that never do anything that are inherently despicable, never do anything overtly bad, that still suck. But I'd like to, if I can help one traumatized kid through an episode of severe depression, it'd all be worth it. If I could help one recovering addict stay the course, it'd all be worth it. If I could help somebody take the gun out of their mouth, it'd be worth it.
That really though like hits home, because that in a lot of ways, I wasn't an addict, but I was like a 15-year-old kid who was totally lost, and it was like Blood for Blood gave me a worldview, like a way to view the world that, when you're talking about fucking royalty in exile, like it gave me like a sense of self-confidence that like what I was coming from, being from a super ordinary fucking New England town, feeling like a scumbag, feeling like I didn't have anything going for me, and having that rage that you can't put your finger on,
yeah.
and like a hostility towards being forced into a world that you don't really care for. I mean, it gave me like a viewpoint to view the world that allowed me to be able to deal with it, and that gave me like a certain amount of pride that I never experienced before, because I was never a person that gave a shit about where I was from or who I was per se, but it gave me like an ability to actually be more content with that. And like, so at least on an individual level, that's a big part of why it's just such a big honor to get to have a conversation with you, to get you to come to my show and stuff the other day, is because you fundamentally shaped how I viewed the world. Dude,
thank you. It's an honor to have you here. You fucking came here. Like, I know what you're doing. And it matters to a lot of fucking people, and I believe you care about it. I believe it matters to you. I don't think it's a cynical thing. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Yeah.
Hey, I thought it's probably a good note to end it on. Rob, Everybody, check out your social media, your sold Twitter account, the White Trash Rob Twitter account's on the screen right now. Check out the new Ramallah project dropping soon. How long are we waiting for this?
Oh man, that's half the reason I haven't done a video in about a month. It's held up. It's fucking typical fucking music business shit.
Right.
Like I got 10 years of music and I can't get it out.
I've heard most of it, and there's definitely new shit on the way. Streaming services, you can still put a fucking nickel in this guy's pocket. You go listen to this shit on Apple Music right now, probably, right? Somehow, some way, like a penny of that'll trickle back to you one day.
Someday.
Yeah. All right. So, White Trash Rob, it's been a fucking honor. Thank you very much. This has been No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Thank you, brother.
Pull for the rope.
Hey.
If you don't fuck with me, you're a stupid dumb idiot. If you don't fuck with me, you're a stupid dumb idiot.
I'm ballin' like an